He looked at her faded jeans and messy bun and saw a trespasser. He looked at her skin color and saw a threat. Captain Elias Thorne, a man with 30 years of flight experience and an ego to match, thought he was protecting his precious Gulfstream G650 from a ghetto stray who had wandered onto the tarmac. He screamed in her face, threw her bag into a puddle, and called the police to drag her away. He was so busy asserting his authority that he forgot to check the flight manifest. If he had, he would have seen the name on the ownership deed wasn't just a passenger, it was the woman he was about to arrest. And the signature on his termination letter. It was about to be hers. The heat coming off the tarmac at Van Nuys Airport was enough to distort the air, shimmering in waves that made the distant hangars look like mirages. It was a blistering Tuesday in Los Angeles, the kind of heat that made tempers short and patience thin. Captain Elias Thorne adjusted his cap, checking his reflection in the pristine, polished aluminum of the Gulfstream G650ER. He smoothed his silver mustache, a perfectly groomed line of authority on his upper lip. At 58, Elias was a relic of the golden age of aviation, or at least that's what he told anyone who would listen. He missed the days when pilots were treated like gods and passengers knew their place. "She's a beauty, isn't she, Cap?" Elias glanced down at Marcus, his new co-pilot. The kid was young, barely 30, with eager eyes and a nervous habit of tapping his pen against his clipboard. "Don't get too attached, Marcus," Elias grunted, checking his Rolex Submariner. "We're just the drivers. The owner is some tech mogul from Silicon Valley. Probably some 20-something kid in a hoodie who made an app for dog walking. They're all the same. No respect for the machine." Elias took a deep breath of jet fuel and ozone, the perfume of his life. Today was a big day. The charter company Apex Sky Services had just been acquired by a massive shadowy conglomerate called Vance Heavy Industries. Rumors were flying that the new CEO was coming to inspect the fleet personally. Elias wanted everything perfect. He wanted to prove that despite his age and his massive salary, he was indispensable. He walked around the nose of the jet, running a white-gloved hand along the fuselage. That's when he saw her. Standing near the boarding stairs was a woman. She was black, perhaps in her mid-30s, wearing oversized sunglasses, ripped denim jeans, and a faded grey hoodie that looked 2 sizes too big. She had a battered leather duffel bag slung over one shoulder and was typing furiously on her phone. Elias felt a vein in his temple throb. Security at Van Nuys was supposed to be tight. This was a private terminal for the elite, not a bus stop for vagrants. "Hey!" Elias shouted, his voice cutting through the drone of a distant engine. "You step away from the aircraft." The woman didn't look up immediately. She finished typing her message, hit send, and then slowly lifted her head. She pulled her sunglasses down the bridge of her nose, peering at him with eyes that were tired but sharp. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was calm, almost bored. "I said, step away from the plane." Elias barked, marching toward her. He puffed out his chest, using his height and his 4 striped epaulettes to intimidate her. "This is a restricted area. Who let you through the gate?" The woman sighed, shifting the weight of her bag. "The gate was open. I'm just checking the tail number, N650VH. This is the one." "The one?" Elias let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. "The one for what? A selfie? Listen, sweetheart, this isn't an Instagram backdrop. This is a $65 million machine. You scratch that paint and you'll be paying for it for the rest of your life, assuming you even have a job." Marcus, the co-pilot, hurried over, looking uncomfortable. "Cap, maybe we should just ask security to escort her." Quiet, Marcus, Elias snapped. He turned back to the woman, stepping into her personal space. He could smell her perfume, something subtle sandalwood and rain, but he dismissed it. I know your type. You sneak in here hoping to meet a rapper or a ball player, hoping to snag a ride or a payday. Well, not on my watch. The woman fully removed her sunglasses now. Her expression wasn't fearful. It was calculating. She looked at Elias's name tag, then at his face, memorizing him. My type, she asked softly. And what type is that? Captain Thorne, the type that doesn't belong. Elias sneered, pointing a finger toward the chain-link fence 100 yards away. Now get your ass off my tarmac before I have you arrested for trespassing and federal aviation sabotage. The woman stared at his finger, then up at his eyes. A small, cold smile touched her lips. Sabotage, she repeated. That's a big word. You might want to be careful how you throw it around. Are you threatening me? Elias's face turned a shade of crimson. He grabbed the strap of her duffel bag. That's it. I'm calling the police. He yanked the bag. She didn't let go. For a second, they were locked in a tug-of-war, the veteran pilot and the intruder in the hoodie. Let go of my bag, she said, her voice dropping an octave. It wasn't a request. I'm confiscating this for evidence. Elias lied, pulling harder. The strap snapped. The bag hit the asphalt with a heavy thud, spilling its contents. Elias expected to see drug paraphernalia or stolen goods or perhaps cheap clothes. Instead, what spilled out onto the hot tar silenced Marcus instantly. A sleek silver MacBook Pro, a thick stack of files stamped with Top Secret, Proprietary, and a black velvet box that popped open to reveal a diamond tennis bracelet that glittered violently in the sun. Elias stared at the items, then back at the woman. He didn't see wealth, he saw theft. Stolen! He muttered, a twisted triumph in his voice. I knew it. You're nothing but a thief. The woman whose name was Serafina didn't scramble to pick up her things. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She simply crouched down, closed the velvet box with a snap, and picked up the files. She dusted off the cover of the top folder. Marcus, she said, looking past Elias to the terrified co-pilot. Would you mind holding this? She held out the laptop. Marcus froze. Don't you touch that, Marcus! Elias roared. She's manipulating you. This is a crime scene now. Elias grabbed his radio from his belt. Tower, this is Captain Thorne on the north ramp. I have a 1031 in progress. Intruder on the tarmac. Aggressive. Possibly armed. Send security and LAPD immediately. Serafina stood up, brushing off her knees. Aggressive. She raised an eyebrow. I haven't raised my voice once. You, however, are spitting on my boots. Elias looked down. She was wearing boots, all right. But they weren't cheap knockoffs. They were bespoke leather combat boots, the kind that cost more than a first-class ticket to London. But Elias was too far gone to notice the details. He was committed to the narrative he had built in his head. She was the enemy, and he was the hero protecting the castle. You think you're smart, Elias hissed, stepping closer again. You think because you speak well you can fool me. I've flown Saudi princes and presidents. I know what power looks like, and it doesn't look like you. Is that so? Serafina crossed her arms. Tell me, Captain, what does power look like? Does it look like a white man in a uniform yelling at a woman? It looks like ownership, Elias spat. It looks like the people who sign the checks. And right now, the new owner of this airline is on his way here. Mr. Vance. And when he arrives and sees this trash on his tarmac, he's going to thank me personally. Serafina blinked. A strange expression crossed her face, half amusement, half pity. "Mr. Vance." "That's right. Vance Heavy Industries. A serious man. Not some affirmative action charity case like you." The air around them seemed to drop 10 degrees. The slur hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. Even Marcus audibly gasped. "Cap, that's too far," Marcus whispered. "Shut up," Elias snapped. "She needs to know her place." Serafina took a step forward. For the first time, Elias felt a flicker of unease. She wasn't big, but the way she carried herself suddenly changed. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by a steel-spined posture that radiated danger. "My place," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You want to talk about places, Captain Thorne? Your place is in the cockpit, ensuring the safety of the vessel. Your place is to serve the client. Your place is not to assault women and destroy property based on your prehistoric prejudices." "You are not a client," Elias screamed, losing all control. He shoved her. It wasn't a hard shove, but it was enough to make her stumble back a step. "That's assault," she said calmly. "That's removing a trespasser." Suddenly, the sound of sirens wailed across the tarmac. 2 airport security SUVs screeched to a halt, followed closely by a black Cadillac Escalade. "Finally," Elias grinned, adjusting his tie. "Now you're going to learn how the real world works." 4 security officers jumped out, hands on their holsters. "What's the problem here, Captain?" the lead officer asked, eyeing Serafina. "This woman broke through the perimeter," Elias lied smoothly. "She attacked me, tried to board the aircraft, and I suspect she's stolen jewelry and electronics in that bag. I want her handcuffed and removed immediately." The officer turned to Serafina. "Ma'am, put your hands behind your head and get on your knees. Now!" Serafina didn't move. She looked past the security guards to the black Escalade. The back door opened, and a man in a sharp Italian suit stepped out. He looked panicked. "Wait!" the man in the suit yelled, running toward them. It was Mr. Henderson, the regional director of the airport. Elias knew him well. Henderson was a man who bowed to money. "Mr. Henderson," Elias called out, waving. "Don't worry, I've got the situation under control. Just some local riffraff trying to—" "Quiet, you idiot!" Henderson shouted at Elias as he sprinted past him. Elias was stunned. Henderson ran straight up to the woman in the hoodie. He didn't tackle her. He didn't yell at her. He bowed. "Dr. Vance," Henderson gasped, breathless and sweating. "I'm so sorry. We tracked your phone. We didn't realize you had walked from the general aviation terminal. The car was waiting for you." Elias felt the blood drain from his face. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Dr. Vance," Elias whispered. Serafina ignored Henderson for a moment. She looked at the security guard who still had his hand on his taser. "You can stand down," she said. Then she turned her eyes to Elias. They were cold, hard, and unforgiving. "Mr. Henderson," Serafina said, her voice carrying clearly in the silence. "This pilot tells me he is waiting for the owner. He says he's waiting for a Mr. Vance." Henderson looked confused. "But, Dr. Vance, you are the owner. You are the CEO of Vance Heavy Industries." "I know," Serafina said, never breaking eye contact with Elias. "But Captain Thorne here seems to think that power doesn't look like me. He thinks power is a white man." Elias's knees felt weak. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Vance. Not a man. Her. "Dr. Vance," Elias stammered, his voice trembling. I didn't know. You weren't wearing a badge. The hoodie. I just thought..." You thought what? Serafina stepped closer, invading his space, just as he had done to her. You thought you could bully a black woman because you assumed she was powerless. You destroyed my property. You assaulted me. You used a racial slur in front of your junior officer. She bent down and picked up the broken strap of her bag. She held it up like a piece of evidence. I didn't steal this jet, Captain, she said. I bought it. I bought the company that operates it. And do you know why I bought it? Elias couldn't speak. He shook his head numbly. I bought it because I wanted to clean house, she said. I heard rumors about the culture at Apex Sky, the bigotry, the arrogance. I wanted to see it for myself. So I dressed down and I walked up to my own plane to see how my staff treats strangers. She dropped the bag. And you, she whispered, failed the test in the most spectacular way possible. The silence that followed Dr. Vance's declaration was heavier than the humid Los Angeles air. Captain Elias Thorne stood frozen, his mind racing like a turbine spinning out of control. He looked at Henderson, the regional director, hoping for a lifeline, a wink, something to suggest this was a twisted prank. But Henderson was pale, wiping sweat from his forehead, with a handkerchief, refusing to meet Elias's eyes. Dr. Vance, Henderson stammered again. Please allow us to take you to the VIP lounge. It's air-conditioned. We can discuss the transition there. No, Serafina said. She didn't shout, but her voice had the unmistakable cadence of command. She turned her back on Henderson and looked at the scattered contents of her bag on the tarmac. We will handle this right here, in the heat, where Captain Thorne thinks I belong. She pointed to the files Elias had knocked out of her hand. One of them, a blue folder, lay open, half submerged in a shallow puddle of oil and water near the landing gear. Captain, Serafina said, her voice deceptively light. Pick that up. Elias blinked. Excuse me. The blue folder, she said, gesturing with her chin. You threw it there. Pick it up. Elias felt a surge of indignation, his old pride fighting a losing battle against his new fear. He looked at the other security guards, then at Marcus. Marcus was staring at his feet. Elias slowly bent down his knees, popping audibly. He reached into the dirty water and retrieved the soggy folder. His white gloves, usually pristine, were now stained with grime. Open it, Serafina commanded. Read the first page, aloud. Elias's hands shook as he peeled back the wet cardboard cover. The document inside was protected by a plastic sheet, but the water droplets obscured the text. He wiped it with his sleeve, squinting against the glare of the sun. It was a legal document, a bill of sale. Transfer of assets, Elias read, his voice cracking. Between Apex Sky Services and Vance Heavy Industries. Keep reading, Serafina said, crossing her arms. Section 4, paragraph 1, the specific asset listing. Elias scanned down the page. His eyes widened. Asset serial number 6088, Gulfstream G654ER, tail number N650VH. And who is the signatory for the purchasing party? She asked. Elias looked at the bottom of the page. The signature was elegant, sharp, and undeniable. Serafina Vance, Ph.D. You, Elias whispered. Me, she confirmed. You are holding the deed to the plane you just ordered me off of. You are holding the proof of ownership that you threw into a puddle of oil. Do you have any idea the level of incompetence required to try and arrest the person who signs your paycheck? Just then, another vehicle pulled up. It wasn't security. It was a sleek silver sedan. A woman in a sharp blazer stepped out, Ms. Sterling, the chief of HR for Apex Sky. She looked from Elias to Serafina, assessing the situation instantly. She saw the spilled bag, the terrified pilot, and the calm, furious owner. "Dr. Vance," Ms. Sterling said, walking over briskly. "I arrived as fast as I could. Is there a problem?" "A problem?" Serafina laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Ms. Sterling, Captain Thorne here, has accused me of theft, assaulted me, and attempted to have me arrested for trespassing. He also called me a charity case and implied I was a prostitute looking for a rapper." Ms. Sterling's face went rigid. She turned slowly to Elias. "Captain Thorne, did you say those things?" I was protecting the aircraft," Elias blurted out, desperation making his voice shrill. She looked suspicious. She was wearing a hoodie. How was I supposed to know she was the CEO? She didn't look like a CEO. "And what does a CEO look like, Elias?" Ms. Sterling asked, her voice like ice. "She was wandering around," Elias yelled, pointing a trembling finger at Serafina. "Standard protocol says to challenge unauthorized personnel. I was following the manual. You can't fault me for being vigilant." Serafina stepped forward, taking the soggy folder from Elias's hand. "Vigilance is checking a badge. Vigilance is asking a question. What you did was profiling. You saw a black woman in casual clothes, and you decided she was trash. You decided she was a criminal before she even opened her mouth." She opened the folder again and pulled out a second sheet of paper. "Do you know what this is, Captain?" Serafina asked. Elias shook his head. "This," she said, "is a list of the flight crew personnel files I intended to review today. Your file was on top. I was actually coming here to offer you a promotion to chief pilot of the new corporate fleet." Elias felt the air leave his lungs. A promotion?" "I had read about your 30 years of experience," Serafina continued. "I respected your flight hours. I thought, here is a man who knows the sky. Come on. I wanted to meet you informally, man to man, or rather woman to man, to see if we could work together." She dropped the paper. It fluttered to the ground, landing on his polished black shoe. "But now I see that your experience hasn't taught you wisdom. It's only taught you arrogance." Elias looked around. The tarmac felt like a stage, and he was the villain in the final act. The mechanics in the hangar were watching. The fuel truck driver had stopped to watch. Even the passengers in a nearby Cessna were looking out their windows. "Dr. Vance, please." Elias tried to switch tactics. He forced a smile, a grotesque grimace of teeth. "We got off on the wrong foot. It's hot. Tensions are high. I'm an old-school guy, maybe a bit rough around the edges, but I'm the best pilot you have. You need me. This plane, she's tricky. You need someone who knows her quirks." Serafina looked at Marcus, the young co-pilot who was still holding her laptop like it was a holy relic. "Marcus," she said, "you're type-rated on the G650, aren't you?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus squeaked. "Top of my class." "And you've flown this specific bird with Captain Thorne for 6 months." "Yes, ma'am." "Do you think she's tricky?" Marcus hesitated. He looked at Elias, who was glaring at him with eyes that promised retribution. Then he looked at Serafina, who was looking at him with expectation. "No, ma'am," Marcus said clearly. "She flies like a dream, and the autopilot handles 90% of the cruise." Elias's jaw dropped. "Marcus, you traitor!" "That's enough." Ms. Sterling cut in. She pulled a tablet from her bag. "Captain Thorne, we need to formalize this. Dr. Vance, how do you wish to proceed?" Serafina didn't look at HR. She kept her eyes locked on Elias. "Proceed," she said. "We aren't done yet. Captain Thorne called the police, remember? He wanted me arrested. I think we should wait for them to arrive." Elias felt a cold knot in his stomach. The sirens he had been so relieved to hear earlier were getting louder. He had called them to drag her away. Now they were coming for a very different reason. The arrival of the Los Angeles Police Department and the airport police was a spectacle of flashing lights and wailing sirens. 2 cruisers skidded to a halt near the jet boxing in the group. 2 officers stepped out of the first car, hands resting on their belts. They looked tense, expecting a violent intruder. "Who called it in?" the older officer asked, scanning the group. His eyes landed on Elias in his uniform, then on Serafina in her hoodie. Predictably, he stepped toward Elias. "Captain, you reported at 10:31. Elias's voice failed him. "Officer." Ms. Sterling stepped forward, holding up her corporate ID. "I am the head of human resources for Apex Sky. This was a misunderstanding caused by our employee, Captain Thorne." The officer looked confused. "So there's no intruder?" "No," Serafina said, stepping forward. "Just an owner inspecting her property." The officer looked at Serafina, then did a double-take. "Wait. Dr. Vance, Serafina." "Vance?" Serafina nodded. "Hello, Officer Miller. I believe we met at the charity gala for the Police Benevolent Association last year." Officer Miller's face lit up with recognition. "Yes, you donated the new K9 unit vests. Ma'am, is everything all right? We got a call about an aggressive transient. Elias wanted the ground to open up and swallow him whole. Not only was she the owner, she was politically connected. She wasn't just rich. She was a pillar of the community he claimed to protect. The only aggression here," Serafina said, gesturing to the bruise forming on her arm, where Elias had grabbed her, "came from Captain Thorne. He assaulted me when I attempted to identify myself." Officer Miller's demeanor shifted instantly. He turned to Elias, his face hard. "Is this true? Did you put your hands on her?" "I was removing a trespasser," Elias shouted, his defense crumbling into a whine. "I didn't know who she was." "It was a mistake." "Assault isn't a mistake, Captain," Serafina said. "It's a choice, and so is this." She turned to Ms. Sterling. "Draft the termination letter. Cause gross misconduct assault of a superior destruction of company property and violation of the anti-discrimination policy." "Done," Ms. Sterling said, typing on her tablet. "Wait," Elias panicked. "You can't fire me. I have a contract. I have tenure. You have to give me 3 warnings. I'll sue you. I'll sue this whole company into the ground." Serafina laughed. It was a genuine laugh this time, filled with disbelief. "You'll sue?" She walked closer to him until she was whispering in his ear. "Elias, look at the files you threw in the water. One of them is the new non-compete clause that comes with the acquisition. But you didn't sign it yet, did you? Which means I can't enforce that." Elias looked hopeful for a split second. "However," she continued, "I can enforce the FAA reporting guidelines. As the owner of the aircraft, I am obligated to report any pilot who demonstrates emotional instability or violent outbursts on the tarmac. I am filing a formal complaint with the FAA requesting a psychological evaluation of your fitness to fly." Elias went white. A psychological review could ground him for months, maybe years. It was a career death sentence. "You wouldn't," he gasped. "You grabbed me," she said. "You screamed at me. You endangered the safety of the flight crew by creating a hostile environment. You are a liability, Elias, and effective immediately you are trespassing." She turned to Officer Miller. Officer, this man is no longer an employee of Vance Heavy Industries. He is on private property. I would like him removed." Officer Miller nodded. "Captain Thorne, I'm going to need your airport badge." Elias clutched the ID card hanging around his neck. It was his pass key to the world. It was his identity. "Hand it over, Elias," Ms. Sterling said. With trembling hands, Elias unclipped the badge. Officer Miller took it. "And the epaulettes," Serafina added. Elias froze. "What?" "Those 4 stripes represent the authority of the captain," Serafina said. "You don't hold that rank anymore. Not on my tarmac. Take them off." It was the ultimate humiliation. Slowly, painfully, Elias unbuttoned the epaulettes from his shoulders. He held the gold-striped fabric in his hands, looking at them like they were the ashes of a loved one. "Give them to Marcus," Serafina said. Elias looked at his young co-pilot. Marcus looked terrified, but held out his hand. Elias dropped the stripes into Marcus's palm. "Now," Serafina pointed to the gate. "Walk." "My bag is in the cockpit," Elias protested weakly. "We will mail it to you, Sat." "Ms. Sterling said, "Go." Elias Thorne, the man who had ruled the tarmac like a king only 20 minutes ago, turned around. He didn't have his badge. He didn't have his stripes. He didn't have his dignity. He began the long walk back to the public terminal. The sun beat down on him, relentless and unforgiving. He could feel the eyes of the mechanics, the fuel guys, and the police on his back. It was a walk of shame that felt like it lasted hours. As he reached the chain-link fence, the same fence he had told Serafina to crawl back behind, he heard the engines of the Gulf Stream whine to life. He turned back one last time. He saw Serafina walking up the stairs of the jet. She didn't look back at him. She paused at the top, said something to Marcus, and disappeared inside the luxury cabin that was now forbidden to him. Marcus, sitting in the right seat, gave a thumbs up to the ground crew. But then Elias saw movement in the left seat, the captain's seat. A new pilot had climbed in. It was a woman. One of the backup pilots Elias had dismissed as diversity hires just last week. She was putting on a headset, laughing at something Serafina must have said. The jet taxied away the heat blast from the engines, hitting Elias in the face, blowing his hat off his head and tumbling it across the asphalt. He chased after it, stumbling, a pathetic figure, chasing a piece of a uniform he no longer wore. But as Elias sat in his car in the parking lot, 10 minutes later, gripping the steering wheel, he told himself this wasn't over. He was Elias Thorne. He had connections. He had friends in high places. He would make a few calls. He would get another job by tomorrow, and then he would slap Dr. Vance with a wrongful termination suit that would make her head spin. He pulled out his phone and dialed his old buddy Frank, who ran operations at Global Jet Charter, the biggest competitor in the state. "Frankie," Elias said, forcing a jovial tone. "It's Elias. Look, I'm looking for a change of scenery. Yeah, just tired of the management here. I'm available immediately. What do you say?" He waited for Frank's response, a confident smirk on his face. But on the other end of the line, there was a long, awkward pause. "Elias," Frank's voice was low, guarded. I can't talk right now. Actually, don't call this number again." Click. Elias stared at the phone. What, he dialed another number. Sarah, a recruiter he had known for years. "Hey, Sarah, Elias Thorne here." "Elias, I'm sorry." Sarah cut him off. "I just got an email blast. It's flagged do not hire. It's everywhere, Elias. The video. What video? Elias whispered, his blood running cold. Someone recorded it, Sarah said. It's on Twitter. It's on YouTube. Pilot assaults black owner. Elias, you're trending. Nobody can touch you. Elias dropped the phone. It clattered onto the floor mat of his car. He stared out the windshield at the planes taking off, realizing with a sick, sinking feeling that the hard karma wasn't just coming. It had already landed. The unraveling of Elias Thorne's life didn't happen in months. It happened in hours. Elias sat in the dim light of his study, the glow of his computer screen illuminating a face that had aged 10 years in a single afternoon. A half-empty bottle of scotch sat next to his keyboard. He was scrolling through Puran the Professional Pilot's rumor network, the industry's most vicious online forum. Usually, Elias went there to laugh at junior pilots complaining about rosters. Today, every thread on the front page was about him. G650. Captain Meltdown at VNY read one subject line. The end of the God complex era read another. He clicked the first link, his hand trembling. The video was embedded at the top. It was shaky, clearly filmed on a cell phone from behind the landing gear. Elias recognized the angle immediately. It was Dave, the lead mechanic, the man Elias had yelled at last week for leaving a smudge on the windshield. Elias pressed play. There he was in high definition. The audio was crisp. You're nothing but a thief. Affirmative action charity case. Get your ass off my tarmac. It was worse than he remembered. On screen, he didn't look authoritative. He looked unhinged. He looked small. And Serafina. She looked like a statue of dignity. The contrast was devastating. He scrolled down to the comments. I flew with this guy in 2015. Total nightmare. CRM crew resource management was non-existent. He treated co-pilots like luggage handlers. Glad he's finally toast. My cousin works at Apex. Says Thorne used to brag about getting female flight attendants fired for weight issues. Karma is a mirror. Forget the job. The FAA needs to pull his medical. This is unstable behavior. The phone rang. It was his wife, Linda. She was supposed to be at her tennis club, Elias. Her voice was tight, vibrating with a mixture of fear and fury. I just got a call from the bank. Our refinancing application for the beach house. It was denied. It's a mistake, Elias slurred, taking a sip of scotch. I'll fix it. They said they did an employment verification check an hour ago, Linda hissed. Apex told them you were terminated for gross misconduct. Elias, what did you do? And why is my sister texting me a link to a TMZ video? Linda, listen. No, you listen. The club manager just called me. He said maybe it's best if we don't attend the gala this weekend. He said they don't want controversy. You've humiliated us. The line went dead. Elias threw the phone across the room. It bounced off the wall, cracking the screen. He was a pariah, but he still had his pride. He was a captain. He had 18,000 flight hours. The internet would forget. It always forgot. He just needed to lay low, maybe take a contract job overseas. China. The Middle East. They didn't care about Twitter politics there. They just wanted someone who could land a heavy jet in a crosswind. He opened his email and drafted a message to a broker in Dubai he knew. Ahmed, old friend. Looking for a change of pace. Available for immediate relocation. 650 ER type rated. Let's talk. He hit send, feeling a glimmer of hope. The response came 3 minutes later. It was an automated kickback, but not from the server. It was a personal auto-reply from Ahmed's address, but the content was chilling. Sender blocked. Reason: reputational risk protocols. Global Aviation Blacklist Database. Reference number 88392. Elias stared at the number. 88392. He wasn't just fired. He was flagged. The big insurance underwriters, Lloyd's of London AIG Allianz, they shared data. If a pilot was deemed a liability due to negligence or gross behavioral issues, they wouldn't insure the hull of any jet he flew. And if a company couldn't insure the jet with him in the cockpit, he couldn't fly. He was uninsurable. The Scotch bottle was empty. Elias put his head in his hands and wept. Not tears of remorse, but tears of a man who realized the castle he built was made of sand and the tide had just come in. 3 months later, the smell of luxury jet fuel and expensive leather was a distant memory. Now Elias Thorne smelled of pesticides and rust. He was standing on a dirt airstrip outside of Bakersfield, California, kicking the tire of a battered Cessna 188 Aguagon. It was a crop duster. No autopilot, no air conditioning, no flight attendant bringing him espresso. Just him, the burning sun, and fields of almonds that needed spraying. Thorne. "Get in the air," shouted a man named Buck, the owner of the outfit. Buck was a man who chewed tobacco and didn't care about Twitter. He paid Elias in cash under the table, barely above minimum wage. "I'm going," Elias grumbled, climbing into the cramped cockpit. It was humiliating. Elias Thorne, who used to fly at Mach 0.90 at 45,000 feet, was now flying 10 feet off the ground, dodging power lines for a living. His uniform was a grease-stained t-shirt. His crew was a teenager named Jimmy, who filled the chemical hopper. He took off the engine, sputtering slightly. He spent the next 4 hours banking hard over the fields, his body aching from the G-forces. It was dangerous flying. One mistake, one wire he didn't see, and he was dead. But he needed the money. The lawsuit from Apex regarding the damage to the company's reputation was looming, and Linda had moved to her sister's house. He landed just as the sun was setting, his ears ringing. He taxied to the hangar, expecting to grab his envelope of cash and go to the motel where he was staying. But when he cut the engine, he saw a black sedan parked next to Buck's pickup truck. It was clean. Too clean for this dirt patch. Elias's heart hammered. Had the FAA found him? Was he going to jail for flying commercial operations without a valid medical? He hadn't renewed it because he couldn't pass the psych evaluation. Serafina had flagged. He climbed out of the Cessna, wiping sweat from his face with a rag. Buck was standing there, looking uncomfortable. Next to him was a man in a suit. Elias recognized the suit before he recognized the face. It was a lawyer's suit. Expensive, tailored. Elias Buck said, spitting into the dirt. "This fella here needs a word, Mr. Thorne," the lawyer said. He was young, sharp-eyed. "My name is Arthur Pendleton. I represent the Vance Foundation." Elias froze. Vance. She had found him. "I have nothing left," Elias shouted, throwing his rag on the ground. "She took my job. She took my reputation. She took my wife. What more does she want? The blood in my veins." "Dr. Vance doesn't want your blood, mister," Thorne Pendleton said calmly, opening a briefcase on the hood of the car. "She wants to offer you a choice." "A choice," Elias laughed bitterly. I'm spraying bugs for $10 an hour. I don't have choices. Actually, you do, Pendleton said. He pulled out a document. Dr. Vance is aware that you are flying off the books here. She is aware you are violating FAA regulations by operating commercially without a valid Class 1 medical. She could make one phone call to the FSDO, Flight Standards District Office, and you would face federal prison time for aviation fraud. Elias felt his knees buckle. He grabbed the strut of the Cessna to hold himself up. "Please," he whispered. "Don't." "She doesn't want to send you to prison," Pendleton continued. "She believes in restorative justice. She wants to make a deal." "What deal?" "The Vance Foundation is launching a new initiative," Pendleton explained. "A scholarship program for underprivileged youth who want to become pilots. Kids from the inner city. Kids who look like the people you spent your career looking down on." Elias stared at him. "She wants you to teach them?" Elias asked, confused. "God, no," Pendleton scoffed. "We wouldn't let you near them as an instructor. Your toxicity is documented." "No, she wants you to speak to them." "Speak to them." "She wants you to be the warning," Pendleton said, his voice hard. "She is organizing a seminar series on ethics and bias in aviation. She wants you to stand on stage, play the video of what you did, and then explain to these young cadets exactly how you ruined your life. She wants you to tell them about the ego, the racism, the assumption that the cockpit belonged to you by birthright." Elias felt a surge of nausea. She wanted to parade him around. She wanted him to be the scarecrow. "And if I refuse?" Elias asked. "Then I make the call to the FAA regarding your illegal crop dusting operations," Pendleton said, taking out his phone. "And we proceed with the civil litigation for the $4 million in brand damage you caused Apex Sky. But if I do it, if you complete the tour, 6 seminars, 6 cities, the Foundation will settle the lawsuit. We will ask the FAA to suspend the investigation into your current activities. You won't fly jets again, Elias, but you won't die in prison. It was a deal with the devil. Or perhaps a deal with an angel of vengeance." Why, Elias asked, his voice shaking. "Why give me an out?" Pendleton looked at the dusty, broken man standing before him. "Because Dr. Vance said that simply destroying you is too easy. She wants you to be useful. She wants your failure to be the fertilizer for someone else's success." Elias looked at the crop duster, then at the endless, empty sky. He thought about the motel room waiting for him. He thought about the silence of his phone. "When does it start?" Elias asked. "Tomorrow," Pendleton said, handing him a plane ticket. "Economy class. Middle seat." Elias looked at the ticket. It was a flight to Atlanta. And Mr. Thorne Pendleton added, closing his briefcase, "Pack a nice shirt. You're going to be on YouTube again. But this time, try to make it educational." As the black car drove away, kicking up a cloud of dust that coated Elias's face, he realized the twist wasn't that he had been caught. The twist was that Serafina Vance had found a way to own him, even when he wasn't on her payroll. She had turned his very existence into a lesson for the people he despised. He walked back to the hangar to tell Buck he quit. But as he walked, he felt something strange. A weight. The weight of the truth he would have to tell. For 30 years, he had written his own legend. Now he had to go on stage and read his own obituary while he was still alive. But in the shadows of the hangar, a figure was watching him. It wasn't Buck. It was someone else. Someone who had been tracking Elias for reasons that had nothing to do with Serafina Vance. A man stepped out from behind the fuel tanks. He wore a leather jacket and sunglasses despite the twilight. "Elias Thorne?" the man asked. "Yeah, that's me," Elias said wearily. "If you're with the press, get lost." "I'm not with the press," the man said. He reached into his jacket. Elias flinched, expecting a weapon. Instead, the man pulled out a heavy envelope. "My name is Silas. I represent a private interest. We saw your video. We saw how you handled that woman." "I handled her poorly," Elias muttered. "I know." "Depends on who you ask," Silas said, a dark smile spreading across his face. "My employer thinks you handled her exactly right. He thinks you're a victim of the woke mob. He thinks you're a patriot." Elias paused. "Who is your employer?" "Someone who owns a lot of planes. Someone who needs pilots who aren't afraid to enforce the old rules. We have a job for you, Captain, but it's not in the US, and it pays 3 times what Vance was paying you." Elias looked at the plane ticket to Atlanta. In one hand, the path of redemption and humiliation. Then he looked at the envelope in the other hand, the path of money, ego, and revenge. The karma had hit him hard, but Elias Thorne was about to make a choice that would determine if he learned from it, or if he would double down and crash and burn for good. Elias Thorne stood in the fading light of the Bakersfield evening, the dust from the fields settling on his boots. In his left hand, the ticket to Atlanta, a path to redemption, albeit through humiliation. In his right hand, the heavy envelope from Silas, a path to money vindication and the restoration of his ego. He looked at the ticket. Economy class. He imagined himself standing on a stage in a community center, apologizing to a room full of young cadets, with Serafina Vance watching from the back with that cool, pitying smile. The thought made bile rise in his throat. He was Elias Thorne. He didn't apologize. He commanded. 3 times the pay?" Elias asked, looking up at Silas. Silas smirked, the reflection of the dying sun in his sunglasses making him look like a demon. "Tax-free. And you're the boss. No HR ladies. No diversity quotas. Just you, the stick and the sky." Elias crushed the plane ticket to Atlanta in his fist. He let it drop into the dirt. "When do we leave?" Silas opened the passenger door of his sedan. "Right now." The journey was a blur of private airstrips and fuel stops. They flew south. Far south. By the time Elias stepped onto the tarmac of his new base, the dry heat of California had been replaced by the suffocating humidity of the jungle. They were in a remote region of South America. Elias didn't ask where. He didn't care. He was just happy to see the plane waiting for him. It was a Gulfstream G4, older than the G650, but still a heavy jet. A serious machine. "Here she is," Silas said, patting the fuselage. "The Dark Horse." Elias walked around the jet. His experienced eye immediately caught issues. The tires were bald. There was a patch of rust near the tail cone that had been painted over with the wrong shade of white. There was no registration number on the tail, just a matte black paint job. "She needs maintenance," Elias said, frowning. "I need to see the logbooks." A man stepped out of the hangar. He was short, thick-necked, and wore a gold chain that looked heavy enough to anchor a boat. This was El Patron, though he introduced himself as Mr. Rico. "No logbooks, Captain," Rico said, his voice like gravel. "We don't do paperwork here. We do deliveries." Elias stiffened. I don't fly without a pre-flight inspection record. It's unsafe. Rico laughed. He walked up to Elias, invading his space, just as Elias had invaded Serafina's space months ago. But Rico didn't just use words. He pulled back his jacket to reveal a glistening pistol tucked into his waistband. "You fly when I say you fly," Rico whispered. "You are not here because you are good, Captain Thorne. You are here because you are desperate. You are here because no one in the civilized world will hire you. You belong to me now." Elias felt a cold dread wash over him. He had traded a moral prison for a literal one. He wasn't a captain here. He was a mule. For 3 weeks, Elias flew. The routes were terrifying. Night flights with no lights landing on dirt strips cut into the rainforest, taking off heavy with crates he was forbidden to open. He suspected drugs, maybe guns, maybe worse. He slept on a cot in the hangar. He ate rice and beans. He drank warm water. His uniform was a stained polo shirt. Every time he landed, he thought about the ticket to Atlanta. He thought about the clean, air-conditioned lecture hall where he could have been speaking. He realized now that Serafina Vance hadn't been trying to humiliate him. She had been trying to save him. She had offered him a lifeboat, and he had chosen the anchor. The end came on a Tuesday. Elias was prepping for a flight to a clandestine strip in Mexico. The weather was atrocious thunderstorms battering the coast. "We can't go," Elias told Silas. "The radar is painting red everywhere. It's suicide." "The shipment goes tonight," Silas spat. "Get in the plane." "I'm the captain," Elias screamed, the last shred of his old ego flaring up. "I make the call," Silas struck him. A brutal backhand that sent Elias sprawling onto the wet concrete. "You are a driver," Silas yelled. "Get in the seat!" Blood dripping from his lip. Elias climbed into the cockpit. His hands shook as he fired up the engines. He taxied out the rain lashing the windshield. He lined up on the runway, pushed the throttles forward, and prayed. They took off into the blackness. The turbulence was violent. The old jet groaned the airframe, stressing under the load. 40 minutes into the flight, a warning light flashed. Hydraulic pressure low. Then another. Engine 2, fire. "Mayday, mayday," Elias called out on the radio instinctively. "Shut up!" Silas screamed from the jump seat. "Radio silence, do not call ATC." "We're going down," Elias shouted. "I have to declare an emergency to find an airport. If you land at an airport, we go to prison for life." Silas wrestled for the controls. The plane banked hard, right, losing altitude. Elias fought the yoke, fought. Silas fought the storm. Through a break in the clouds, he saw lights below. A city. An airport. He didn't care about the drugs anymore. He just wanted to live. Elias punched Silas in the throat, stunning him, and banked the plane toward the runway lights. "Tower! This is an unidentified aircraft engine failure, declaring emergency landing immediately." He brought the heavy jet down hard. The landing gear collapsed on impact. Sparks showered the runway as the plane skidded on its belly, screeching like a dying banshee, before spinning off into the grass and coming to a halt. Silence. Then sirens. Elias unbuckled his seatbelt. Silas was unconscious. Elias kicked open the emergency exit and slid down the wing into the mud. He looked up to see blue lights surrounding him. But it wasn't the rescue squad. It was the federal police, heavily armed, dogs barking. They tackled him into the mud. As they cuffed his hands behind his back, Elias looked at the burning plane. The crates had burst open. White powder was scattering in the wind. He was dragged to a holding cell in a Mexican federal prison. It was a concrete box, 5 feet by 5 feet. No windows. A bucket for a toilet. 2 days later, a guard threw a newspaper into his cell. It was a local paper, but on the back page there was a syndicated article from the United States. Elias picked it up with trembling hands. His Spanish was poor, but he understood the picture. It was Serafina Vance. She was standing at a podium, cutting a ribbon. The headline read, "Vance Foundation opens new aviation academy for inner city youth." In the photo standing next to her was Marcus, his old co-pilot. Marcus was wearing a captain's uniform. He was smiling. He looked proud. The caption identified him as Chief Pilot Marcus Green. Elias dropped the paper. He remembered the choice. The lawyer Pendleton standing in the dust in Bakersfield. "She wants you to be the warning." Elias laughed, a dry, broken sound that echoed off the damp walls. He had refused to be the warning in a classroom. So now he would be the warning in a cage. The heavy steel door slammed shut, plunging him into darkness. Elias Thorne, the man who thought he owned the sky, was finally grounded. And that is the tragic, self-inflicted downfall of Captain Elias Thorne. He had 30 years of experience, but 0 years of wisdom. He mistook money for worth and arrogance for strength. When life gave him a second chance, a rare opportunity to redeem himself through humility, his ego forced him to choose the path of destruction. He ended up with nothing, no rank, no freedom, and no legacy, while the very people he looked down upon soared above him. It's a brutal reminder that in the modern world, your character is your resume. You can be the most skilled person in the room, but if you treat people like dirt, eventually the ground is exactly where you'll end up. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next saga of instant karma. What would you have done if you were Elias? Would you have taken the ticket to Atlanta? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching and fly safe.